Welcome to another episode of the Enterprise Thought Leadership Podcast, where we have in-depth conversations with industry pioneers making an impact. I'm your host, Tim Bond, founder of techpros.io. Today I have the privilege of speaking with Andy Cockburn, founder and CEO of Mention Me, a leading customer advocacy platform that's recently launched in the US. Andy has an impressive background and worked as a strategy consultant at Bain & Company before pivoting into entrepreneurship. He founded Mention Me in 2012 and has since led the company through tremendous growth, cementing its position at the forefront of leveraging customer relationships for sustainable growth. In our conversation today, Andy shares his insights on customer psychology, the evolution of marketing, and how brands can unlock exponential growth through advocacy. Now, TechPros is currently interviewing marketing, brand, customer, and e-commerce leaders in the US for a publication entitled Unlocking Customer Value, the Role of Relationships and Advocacy in a World of Changing Consumer Behaviour and Generative AI. So if you're interested in participating, details on how to register will be provided at the end of this episode. So let's get into my discussion with Andy.
Thanks for agreeing to do this interview, Andy. And if it's all right with you, the first time I read about you was so kind of blown away and interested by that sort of really kind of shocking moment. Was it the beginning of the year when the Silicon Valley Bank crashed, and you were instrumental in, I guess, rallying a lot of the entrepreneurs in the tech industry and, more importantly, the government to address and ultimately fix the problem. I was just wondering whether, you could perhaps share a little. Well, first of all, just give us a little bit of background to yourself, and then tell us about that story. Would be wonderful.
Yeah, sure. Relive the horror of that weekend. Thanks for that. So my background is I studied history at university, and then realised that wasn't going to get me a job, so I became a strategy consultant at Bain & Company. And after a few years of learning the good kind of core business stuff there, went to business school and decided after business school I really, really want to be an entrepreneur. So I did my first startup coming straight out of business school in the group payment space, making it easy for groups of friends to book and pay for things together, which is a really interesting space. And making it like if you wanted to book a trip to the theatre or go to a festival with friends or book a stag do or a hen do, making it easy for someone to collect all the money from their friends and book for things, which is a great pain point, but was really hard to get people to be willing to try it at the time. It was just a bit too early. People weren't willing to use new services and put money through unknown websites. But it got me hooked on startup. And I then joined a business called HomeAway, which was the world's largest marketplace for holiday rentals, where I ran the UK business, which was a great business. And I was there when it IPO'd on the NASDAQ. But in the year running up to that, me and my co-founder, who mentioned me, who was also working there, started realizing that there was this just huge opportunity to grow from referrals and grow from our customers spreading the word. And when we surveyed customers there, about 60% of them said that they grew on the back of, or they were coming in on the back of a recommendation from a friend. And that was like, wow, this is a great business if that's the case. But actually, there's very little you could do in the business once you got that stat. And so we spent time trying to figure out how we can actually take control of that and encourage customers to go out and share how great the experience was and bring in more. And that was basically what set up the premise for Mention Me. Like, how can we take this to market so we can make it easy for every business to grow by bringing in their friends? And the last decade has been set up, or has been spent building Mention Me to where we are today, which has been, we've been very fortunate that every year has been up and to the right, and it's been a really, really good experience.
Brilliant. Well, I'll save you from reliving the SVB experience. If we've got time, which we probably won't at the end, you might be able to say a few words on that. But let's stick with Mention Me for now. So, okay, so you had this experience. You saw the value in, I guess, is referral marketing the right sort of category phrase for it? Is it?
Certainly, where we started was referral marketing. It was like, how can we create the mechanics to enable customers to share with their friends so that more new customers come into a business? think where we are now, we talk much more about customer advocacy, whereas referral is a part of that. Like, how can you recognize that your customers are way more than just their wallets? They are hugely valuable to you in everything they do to go and advocate on your behalf. And how can you track that so that you can understand the value that comes into your business, so that you can treat those customers appropriately and find more of them?
Yeah, interesting. So, I mean, maybe we just dive straight into sort of getting to sort of the nitty gritty, really. So, perhaps you could just explain a little bit more about your platform, how it is actually helping customers, and perhaps how it works. I know sort of AI is behind it, which is obviously flavor, as you say, flavor of the month, flavor of the decade, flavor of the millennium, probably. But yeah, share with us, would you, as much as you're happy to, on your product? That'd be really interesting.
Absolutely. So like, because of our heritage, and because referral is the starting point for most of the work that we do. So we normally work with a client and we start running their referral program. And that sounds very simple. Like, referral programs have been around since the dawn of time, but actually referral is fascinating because in the middle of a referral, it's just an interaction between two people. And in that interaction is some really fascinating psychology. Like, before I'm sharing anything with you, I'm trying to figure out what you're going to think of me for sharing it.
Right. Yes.
And so we all do this all the time, that microsecond of like, am I going to bother sharing this? And basically there's always first you've got to clear the barrier of social risk. Like, if I think you could judge me negatively for sharing it, I'm going nowhere near it. And that might be because I think you'll judge me for being associated with a brand, or I'm not sure the brand will live up to their promises, or it might just be that I don't know what you're going to see if I'm sending you an email, and I can't risk you getting something that looks spammy. And once you clear social risk, it's how can we make sure you feel good about that you, as my friend, is going to feel positively about it, so that I think our relationship is going to be enhanced.
Right.
And if I think our relationship is going to be enhanced, then I will share it. And so at the core of our referral product that we've been working on for the last 10 years is testing and segmentation to figure out what to say to each customer that's going to make them most likely to want to refer the brand. And so that's kind of the starting point for what we do. But then once you start getting referral to work, you start to see who your most valuable customers are, not just from the view of spend, but in terms of who's out there bringing in new customers.
Yeah,
that gives you a really different lens on your customer base. And we talk about not just looking at a customer's revenue, but looking at their extended customer revenue, which is the revenue they spent and the revenue they brought in from their friends coming in. And that changes the way that you think about your business and value in your business. And then we can put AI behind that data to start to understand each individual customer's propensity to refer. We can also use AI and machine learning to understand their predicted extended customer revenue in 12 months' time. And then that becomes the base of or the fundamental data that people use to segment their customers. And just taking that approach means you suddenly build a growth engine of advocates, because you're treating advocates appropriately, recognizing their value and driving way more of them. And that creates an organic growth engine that is really hard for competitors to beat. Like, once you've got that organic growth engine, you've got better quality customers coming in cheaper. And if your competitors are out there throwing all their money at Google and Facebook, they just can't compete.
Fantastic. Very interesting. So if we sort of just talk perhaps about how the market has changed, because all markets are changing at an ever increasing pace. Talk us through, what the key or the biggest changes that you've seen in the kind of consumer landscape, over the last few years, and sort of what are the implications from a consumer brand, from a marketing perspective on that?
Yeah, it's well, like you say, there's been so much change. We've been running Mention Me for more than 10 years now, and there's been a lot of change in that time. But whether it's, if you look at it from a global perspective, whether it's geopolitics or pandemics or the economy, I think what's been really interesting is, I think the pandemic really made a big shift in the way things worked, both from a brand's perspective. So many businesses were growing quite fast in the run-up to the pandemic on the back of the new paid channels online, so especially Google and Facebook.
Right.
But in the run-up to the pandemic and over the pandemic, they became incredibly expensive and incredibly unreliable. And so businesses suddenly didn't have a way of continuing to be able to acquire those customers.
Right.
Customers changed their behaviour dramatically over the pandemic. We all did it. We were suddenly living a new reality, working from home or just staying at home all the time. They became more dependent on online brands, and then the businesses were very good at catering them for that period, but they didn't always manage to maintain the relationships. And so that meant coming out of the pandemic, you've got customers who are much less loyal, and increasingly less loyal when their wallets are suffering at the moment with the state of the economy.
Sure.
And it's really, really expensive and hard to acquire customers. And so businesses are at a point where it's a really challenging economic situation. And from a consumer perspective, there's this increasing desire to build more meaningful relationships with brands. But brands don't always understand a customer holistically. They tend to only look at them in terms of what they're spending, and they're not engaging with them beyond that. And that's one of the things we find fascinating, because once you can share that this customer may have only bought once from you, but they've referred 5 people in the last 6 months, this is actually one of your best customers. Can you please pick up the phone and talk to them, and let's understand why they love you so much and what's going on and how we can find more people like this. It really changes the way that a business is willing to engage with customers beyond just what they're spending.
Brilliant. And could you share any examples of customers who have used or are using your platform in terms of, I don't know whether you've got stats you can share or any examples or anecdotes? It'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, maybe a good example is, just to give you a flavour of what that can mean from a customer perspective. There's a great example I was looking at last week from Bloom & Wild, the online florist.
Mm-hmm.
They're a fabulous business. We worked with them for most of their lifetime, and they get a lot of their new customers from referral, just because they are a really good business. But they haven't. Like, I was looking at a customer who, in her first year, she bought 3 times and she spent £84, and as such, she wasn't a particularly important customer to Bloom & Wild. But she wasn't just contributing in terms of spend. She actually referred 4 customers in that first year, and 2 of those customers were way more valuable than she was. And so her spend in those 4 customers, it was worth £1,800, not just the £84 she spent. And so that really changes how you think about the value of her as a customer. And what was interesting was her 3 purchases were over the first year. The referrals happened pretty steadily over the first year, and then they all stopped. Like, she stopped engaging, she stopped buying, and she stopped referring.
Yes.
If Bloom & Wild had been looking at her holistically and saying, wow, look at this referral, they could have sent her flowers every single quarter to say thank you. And that probably would have kept on the relationship. In fact, the amount of money that they were making from her referring, they probably could have sent her flowers every single week, and it still would have made economic sense to keep her engaged, to keep her buying, to keep her new customers. And then that was the first level of referrals, but it creates this incredible network underneath it. And so over 5 years, she actually introduced about £5,000 worth of value to the business, even though she'd only spent £84 with it.
Wow, that's one hell of an example. And just sorry, carry on.
Yeah, and you just see that all over the place. I was looking at another one recently on Matches Fashion, where one customer spent £216, but she kicked off a referral network that was worth £430,000.
No.
And it's a thing of beauty. You can literally see the whole thing mapped out of like who she introduced, where they went to.
Yeah. Like sort of, obviously it's the wrong analogy, but pyramid selling. I mean, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Branching out. I mean, obviously completely the wrong word, the wrong comparison, but the fact that it's just a network of multiplier effect.
Exactly. It's how a business would want to grow. Like, it's a living organism. Yeah. Let's go with living organism rather than pyramid selling.
Yes.
But it's like, and it's not static. You just see it growing over time, that people are talking to people and bringing in their friends. And it is a thing of beauty when you look at these referral networks under a business.
Yes. And so you mentioned this, going back to the lady who was buying the flowers. So you did, I think you said that there came a time where she stopped referring. Was that right?
Yeah, she stopped being a customer and she stopped referring after about a year.
Right.
Right. If she, so even despite that, she introduced £5,000 over the next few years of the business. But if she carried on going, and if they'd engaged some of the other big people in that referral network more, who were at a critical point, that £5,000 could have become 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 pounds.
No, of course. And you made the point as well that if they had sent the flowers, she might have kept on referring, or you never quite know why someone might have stopped becoming a customer. But just sort of going into the detail then. So, in order to have referred these other what became high spend friends of hers, can you just talk us through that kind of the sort of experience that they would go through? So is it like an email that's sent to them and suggesting that they paint a bit more of a picture on how it works?
We encourage the brands that we work with to promote referral at points of delight. So when the customer is happy, and actually one of those is a very simple one. Once they bought something, like we normally would recommend that they ask their customer to refer their friends at that point. There's no and then we let them share in many different ways, and many of those will be the ones that people think about, like sharing links or whatever. But we also share just by using their name. So that customer was called Ali. I don't actually know her surname, but Ali Smith. She could tell her friends to come to Bloom and Wild and just enter Ali Smith when they're buying for the first time in order to claim an introductory welcome. And then once they get that introductory welcome and have bought, then we go back to Ali and say thank you very much. And normally there's some thank you that the referrer will get for having done that.
Yes.
The incentives are there in referral, but they're never the driver, because it's always that psychology that's the driver. Like what your friend thinks of you is worth way more to you than £5 off a bunch of flowers. And so, but we just find that those encourage people to go through the referral network, which means we get the data so we know what's happening. And also just makes it easier to have the conversation. I love Bloom and Wild. It's an amazing brand. You should definitely buy from them. I can get you a £5 introductory offer is a nicer conversation.
Very good. And is it purely email, or are you using, obviously with all of these mobile platforms now, mobile communication, is that something that you also use?
We use, I think we've got about 20 sharing channels that people, businesses can use. And so we're basically looking to optimize depending on the client and the demographic they're serving and where the customer is interacting. So if someone is sharing from a website, they'll get a different experience if they're sharing within the app than that if they're sharing on a mobile site.
Got it. And going back onto the psychological aspects, which makes so much sense to me, how are they going, what are they going to think of me if I introduce, and then how it will make them feel? Is there any way that your customers or Mention Me itself can in any way kind of influence that sort of psychology, or is it or not?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So what we're doing is testing all the time to figure out what message lands with different customer types, and like some of it is very, very simple and small changes that can make quite a big difference. So a good example from our early days was on Glasses Direct, where we were encouraging people to share with their friends, and it was working to an extent, but it wasn't working quite as well as we would have liked. And, we did some research, and we found that people really struggled to remember which of their friends wore glasses. But they were really good at remembering which of their family members wore glasses. And so we switched the emphasis towards friends or family, and suddenly the referral rate picked up like enormously, because suddenly when you were asked the question, would you like to refer this, they could think of who they would refer it to. And so there's tiny things like that make a very big difference. Even things like whether you talk about giving your friend something, or the fact that you're going to get a thank you if you refer a friend, can make a big difference to the psychology. And that, like, there is no hard and fast rule on that. It depends on the brand. It depends on the customer segment within the brand as to whether they are more motivated by giving their friends something, or the fact that they're going to get money off another purchase, or whatever it might be.
Very, very interesting. And so when you start a new relationship with a customer, so give us a feel for any kind of new technology, there's change management, there's people and process that has to be considered. So if an organization is interested in purchasing Mention Me and incorporating sort of brand advocacy into their kind of, I guess, their marketing mix, probably for want of a better way of positioning it, talk us through the life cycle. How long does it take to kind of get people's heads around how it works, and then going through the process of actually getting people trained on it or implemented into the mix? Perhaps you could talk about that.
So from a tech perspective, it's relatively simple. So it's a tag-based system, so it's a matter of adding 2 or 3 JavaScript tags to the site in order to have the capability to serve referral on the site. We then have a design studio that helps design the look and feel so it's consistent with our clients. And then it's just agreeing what the experiments will be, agreeing what the offers will be. And that normally takes 4 to 6 weeks from signing a contract to getting up and running. We then have a period of optimization. Like optimization is ongoing, but the biggest learning is in the first 3 to 6 months. And so we're working with the client to figure out the tests and work through the tests and figure out what's going to really resonate for different customer segments. And then at the end of that 3 to 6 months, well, at the end of 3 months, we'll start to have meaningful data. So then we can start to form a view as to who the most interesting customers are, start building lookalike audiences of those customers so we can bring in more of them, start thinking about how to influence the segmentation on the back of what we're learning from the referral data, and then go through over the rest of the year really to start to pull in the wider value of advocacy into more than just referral being a channel, to shaping how the business thinks about all of their customers from the lens of advocacy.
That's interesting. And so are you providing kind of like as well as the technology, a sort of a managed service consultancy wraparound where they've got a certain amount of time per month or whatever, and then and you be providing advice?
We don't limit it on time per month, but yes, we have our biggest team is our client success team, who work with our clients to make sure they're successful in not just implementing the technology, but really driving through the value from it.
Brilliant. Get it. Cool. So just on to the thought leadership program that we're running for you, which is really exciting. So which we've just launched. So you're entering the US, right?
Yes.
So when did you open the office? It's Boston, isn't it?
We opened in Boston in January of 23. And it's great. I mean, the States is a fascinating market. It's we're really enjoying starting to work with clients in the States, and have had some really big early successes signing businesses like Michael Kors, and like the need there, I think, is even greater than it is in the UK, just because the market's so much bigger, the opportunity is so much bigger, and businesses have bigger customer bases. And what we're really doing as a business is saying, when you think about growth, don't think about just how much money you've got to spend or where you're going to put it. Instead, before you even think about money, think about how many customers you've got and how you can get them spreading the word, and how you can optimize organic growth from your customers. And the scale that you can operate at in the States from those customer bases is enormous, and so powerful when you can truly understand who your advocates are, how valuable they are, and how you can find more of them.
Sure. And do you just sort of on the sort of the I guess the within your category of customer advocacy, is this a fairly new category, or are there quite a lot of existing players in this market?
No, we're leading the charge on this approach to advocacy. I think there's a few players who have been working in the referral space for the last 10 years or so, but referral treated as a channel is so limiting, and we're the only people who are opening this up to say there is so much more than this. We consider customer advocacy to be a brand new category, and we're leading the charge on helping people realize the potential from it.
Yeah, brilliant, excellent. So if anyone is listening who is in a customer leadership role, or I guess a holistic marketing role is probably the best way to look at it, who's interested in taking an interview, you'll get your interview written up as part of the publication, and the publication is called Unlocking Customer Value: The Role of Relationships and Advocacy in a World of Changing Consumer Behaviour and Generative AI. So we're going to be running this program over for a few months, and we'll be producing publication relatively early in the new year. So Andy, that's great. A really sort of comprehensive understanding of your product and your market. And we do have a few minutes left, so I'm not going to let you get off the hook. I do want to hear about this story because it's so interesting. So tell us about it. Silicon Valley Bank, what happened in the UK?
I think we, like many people, were very dependent on Silicon Valley Bank in the UK, and so I think it was a Thursday afternoon where we started to realise things were not looking good. And one of the things that's that's well known, but the startup ecosystem is so well connected that as soon as one person starts to get spooked out and is asking their founder friends on WhatsApp what's going on, it spreads like wildfire. And it was really clear within a matter of hours that there was going to be a run on the bank. And so we spent Friday trying to get money out, got some out, but it was then on Saturday night that the UK bank went into bankruptcy, and the thing that freaked us out most was the governor of the Bank of England saying, "This isn't a big deal. It doesn't really matter." This does really matter.
Yeah.
So at 7 a.m. on the Saturday morning, I was meeting with my team saying, "Okay, what are we going to do now? We've got to come up with contingency plans in case this doesn't get resolved." And then just realized there were no headlines. It just wasn't in the news. And it's like, we need to change the story here. We can't let the government think that no one cares about this. And so because I've done a couple of startups, and I'm in enough networks in the UK that I knew if I wrote a letter, I could get it signed by a good number of people. And so I just quickly jotted up a letter in half an hour to the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK and said, this will decimate the UK tech startup scene, because Silicon Valley Bank basically was the bank of all of the late stage tech startups, and so it would have been all of the businesses that had proven they could work that would have been potentially destroyed overnight in the UK. It would have been horrendous as an impact. And so managed to draft a letter, got it out to the networks, and within 3 hours 400 CEOs had signed it. And I'm not particularly good in the world of media, but because of the way the world is connected, suddenly Jeff started reaching out to me saying, "I understand there's a letter, can I have it?" And so within about 4.5 hours of starting to write the letter, it was on the front page of the FT, and then it went into all of the rest of the media.
And that was that on a Friday?
It was a Saturday.
It was even on the second, because it wasn't the deal done with HSBC on the weekend, wasn't it?
The deal was announced at 7 a.m. on the Monday morning. So I heard from people on the inside that the letter got to Jeremy Hunt at a very helpful point, and it was good that there was some pressure being applied by the sector, and that it was made clear how important the bank was to the tech sector, and the government had talked a lot about how much it valued the tech sector, so it really needed to find a way.
There was some political impetus to react and do something.
But even I was then on the inside with some of the stuff that was going on over the Sunday, so I was feeling good that a deal was going to get done. But we were getting ready for a board meeting early on the Monday morning to talk about the impact of what had happened if a deal wasn't done. And so that 7 o'clock announcement on the Monday morning was very, very good news.
Champagne breakfast.
Yeah, it wasn't. It was. There were so many harrowing moments over the weekend that it wasn't really champagne.
No, the tremors were still rumbling.
Yeah, exactly. It was.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. It was good. You always get forced out of your comfort zone when things are thrown at you, and it was a harrowing weekend, but it was also a very satisfying weekend to see how the community could come together.
Incredibly. Well, I guess thank you on behalf of everybody for that, because
do things.
Yeah, excellent. Well, Andy, thank you so much for taking the interview, and best of luck with developing the US market. And obviously we're looking forward to lots of interviews on this thought leadership topic.
Yeah, I think it's a fabulous topic. I can't wait for the interviews. Thank you very much.
Cool. Cheers, Andy.
I hope you enjoyed those fascinating insights from customer advocacy expert Andy Cockburn of Mention Me. As mentioned at the start, if you are a brand, customer, e-commerce or marketing professional interested in networking and industry collaboration, you are invited to join our upcoming Tech Pros Thought Leadership interviews, and most likely follow-on roundtables as well, that are going to be focused on relationships, advocacy, and changing consumer behavior. Super easy. Just go to techpros.io. You'll see the option at the top, which is live interviews. Go in there, and if you search for the Unlocking Customer Value interview guide. You can register your interest there. Spots are limited, so be sure to sign up before they all get filled up. And next step will be to have a quick chat with myself before we get you involved in the program. So be sure to subscribe to the Enterprise Thought Leadership podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.